Good evening and welcome to this evening of the MG EVs Community Podcast. We're here to discuss MG EVs, hoping to inform and entertain you for up to an hour. I'm Tom Sedge, T Sedge on the forum. I live in Paynton in Devon and I'm currently driving the MG4 that you see in the picture behind me. And joining us this week, we have some new faces and an old face. Well, no, not too old. Sorry, Miles. From Cheddar in England, we have Anne Smith. Welcome, Anne.
Hi there, I'm Anne Smith. I'm from Cheddar and I'm driving at the moment a ZS Hybrid Plus.
Great. Good to meet you, Anne. Thanks for coming in. And from Harrow in London, we have Keith Shale.
Hello, my name's Keith. I've got the MG3 Hybrid Plus trophy. I've had it since the beginning of May last year, and I live in Harrow in Greater London.
Great. Nice to see you, Keith. Thanks for joining us. And we have from County Antrim in Northern Ireland, David Turnbull. Welcome, David.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. I've got the MG ZS Hybrid Plus trophy.
Great. Good stuff.
And I've bought it on the 1st of December, but it was being repaired for 30 days. So I've only been driving it for January and this month.
Okay. We'll give plenty of time to get onto that. Fantastic. And once again from Chorley Group MG Innovation Development Manager Miles Roberts. Welcome, Miles.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Hi, Miles Roberts. As you said, MG dealer. So I've driven the MG3, the MG ZS Hybrid, and the MG HS new plug-in hybrid as well.
Many thanks to our premium members, Sloucher, MG BGT2ZS, Very Fat Bloke, EV Cog, Whiskery, Lager Baloo, and Big Bear. And if you like what we do at MG EVs, please support us by becoming a premium member. On tonight's podcast, we're going to talk about everything hybrid. It's an important topic because many people go for a hybrid rather than an EV, and there's good reasons for that, why they may be more suitable. And we also tend to spend a lot of time on this podcast focusing on the EV part of the range and not the hybrid. So it's also worth us having a good long discussion about that. So before we dive into the detail and hear from everybody and what their experiences are, maybe like me, you're not quite sure, or you haven't always been quite sure, what the difference is between the EV and the BEV and the FEV and all these different versions and how the drivetrains work. So, Miles, could you give us a quick explanation of the differences and so we're clear about what we're talking about when we talk about these MG hybrids?
Yeah, of course. So basically, we've got increasing levels of electrification. So about 30 years ago, cars started having stop-start systems fitted to them. And the idea with that was that it would, when the vehicle was stationary and not moving, you took the car out of gear, you took your foot off the clutch, and the car switched off the engine. And then to restart, you put your foot on the clutch, and it restarted. And by stopping the engine when the car was not in motion, it meant that it saved a little bit of fuel on the official NEDC drive cycle as they used to use back then. And then they moved on to something called a mild hybrid system. And a mild hybrid system is very much like start-stop with a bit extra. So with a normal start-stop engine, you use a normal 12-volt battery and you use a normal starter motor, which is similar to the Model T Ford, this little cog that goes in and turns the engine over. But with a mild hybrid system, instead they moved to a belt-driven system. So basically you've got something which takes the place of the alternator. It works as both an alternator and also as a motor. And so it can restart the engine at any RPM. So if you're slowing down to see, to a red light ahead, the engine can actually switch off whilst the car's still in motion, and then when you put your foot on the accelerator because the light turns green again, it can restart the engine even if you're not stationary. And so it gives a lot more smoother drive, a lot smoother restart. It's able to restart the engine at say 3,000 RPM rather than just 1,000. And also the electric motor can offer a slight bit of brake horsepower boost because it can actually physically turn a belt on the engine to make it slightly quicker. So it manages to add like up to 5 brake horsepower under extreme acceleration. But a mild hybrid can't actually drive anywhere on electric itself. All it's able to do is just start and stop the engine. So mild hybrid is just start-stop but a bit better. Then move on to self-charging hybrids, which is kind of what you've got with the Hybrid Plus system we've got with MG3 and MG ZS. The Hybrid Plus system uses an electric motor at slow speeds. So the good thing about electric motors is they've got all the torque available at 0 RPM. So you put your foot down and it's instantly got the power. and it uses an engine to supplement that as well. Now, most hybrid cars, Priuses, things like that, only have a small electric motor. Typically, it's sort of less than 50 brake horsepower, and the majority of the power will come from the engine. But with the MG Hybrid Plus system, it's actually got an over 100 brake horsepower electric motor, and so a lot more of the driving can be done on electricity. Having said that, the engine does run as well. So the battery in a MG Hybrid Plus is typically only 1.5 to 2 kilowatt hours in size, so it's only capable of driving a couple of miles on electricity alone. But because it's able to do that stuff that you normally first and second gear in a petrol and diesel car, which is when they tend to be the least efficient, the electric motor takes care of that, so it makes it a lot better efficiency. So you can get sort of 50, 60 miles per gallon out of the MGs, even around town, whereas obviously a traditional diesel might get 60 miles per gallon on a motorway, but around town it might only do 30 because that's when it's in first and second gear. So the Hybrid Plus system is a self-charging hybrid system. So in other words, you don't need to plug it in. It just charges itself by either regenerative braking. So as you put your foot on the brakes, the motor becomes a generator and charges up, or by the engine giving some spare power to the electric motor to then charge the battery. The MGHS is a plug-in hybrid. The difference with that is it's got a much bigger battery. On the new MGHS plug-in hybrid, it's got a 24.8 kilowatt hour battery, which is bigger than the original Nissan Leaf, and it's got a good wallop of power available from the electric motor as well. So it's actually got like 299 brake horsepower in total, of which about 190 comes from the electric motor, and that's capable of driving up to 75 miles on electric alone. So if you can plug the car in at home, then you've basically got an electric car for day-to-day driving. But if once the electric batteries run out, rather than charge it up on a rapid charger, instead you just run it on petrol as a hybrid. So kind of best of both worlds in that sense. Plug-in hybrids always used to be quite useful for tax purposes, but they've changed the rules on that now. But the 75 miles range on the MG means that it is actually in the better tax bracket.
Okay, great. Can you clarify something that I wasn't certain, maybe the others already know, but is the system on the MG3 and the MG ZS the same motor and battery combination? Is it the same system, or is it different?
It's the same system. It's a three-speed automatic gearbox, and basically on the petrol engine, and basically the electric motor fills in between the gear changes. It feels like it's got like an 8-speed box in it. It doesn't feel like a 3-speed at all. And I'm sure that, well, those of you that have got the Hybrid Plus will be able to fill in those details for us. But yeah, it's a 3-speed automatic, but it's not like the old, Sierras from the 70s or whatever. It's it's the same system in both. The MG HS plug-in hybrid is a different system again, but similar principle, but just bigger batteries and things.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I hadn't appreciated all those differences. I didn't know the HS was different too. Okay, great. So now we know what a hybrid is and what we're talking about with the MG range. Guys, why did you choose a hybrid? What made you go for a hybrid rather than a nice car or an EV? Why was it the right choice for you? If we could start with David.
Okay. Why did I go for a hybrid? Because the first hybrid I bought, which I loved, but it was too small. I've got 6 grandchildren now.
Wow.
So I kept it for 3 years. The reason I went for it is I could afford it, and I was intrigued by the hybrid. I had range anxiety about electric vehicle because I can do 10 hours into France. Quite often I would only be going from the seaside where I live to Belfast or Londonderry, or but the range anxiety was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We have an electric driver in the family who's very upset with us for buying a hybrid. The hybrid seems to work, and if you know how to tease it, you can get great results.
Right. Okay.
The MG ZS hybrid is slightly different. You can't tease it in the same manner as you can the others that I've driven, but I'll come back to miles on that later.
Okay, good, fantastic. How about you, Anne? Why did you buy yours?
Well, really, economy, really. I thought I was cheating the system by getting a hybrid rather than the electric. Not anywhere near ready to be driving electric vehicles. Maybe I never will be, but I just thought that was the next best thing. So I just decided. I mean, I had a a Jazz, a Honda Jazz, which was an amazing car. But I guess I just wanted something a little bit more up to date, or not that that's not up to date, but it just. But overall, it was the economy and the fact that I wasn't ready for electric. So.
Right. So it's a stepping stone for you between a conventional car and a possible electric future. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. How about you, Keith?
Well, I'm a little bit different. I have two cars. I have the MG3 Hybrid and I have a fully electric car, a Genesis G80 electrified, which is a big sort of S-Class Mercedes, EQS Mercedes size electric car.
Yeah.
Now, for me, living as I do in a London suburb, there is in terms of fully electric, there is a big advantage, at least there will be up until the end of this year, whereby you don't have to pay the London congestion charge to drive a car into London, which is fully electric. It was the case that you didn't have to pay the congestion charge if you had a hybrid car, but as hybrid cars became more popular, so they removed that benefit. And now, as electric cars were becoming more popular, it's taken a bit of a back step now. As of the end of December this year, that benefit will be dropped for EVs. But for me, the reason why I chose the MG3 was purely value for money. This is a car that is thousands less than any of its rivals. The hybrid drivetrain, as Miles indicated, is very clever. So you're on top of the initial saving when you buy the car, you also benefit from better fuel economy. The car replaced a DS3, which is a small French hatchback. DS became an independent brand from Citroën, but it was based on the Citroën DS3. And by way of example, that car, which had a 1.2 three-cylinder turbocharged engine, which is one of Stellantis Group's sort of popular engines they put in all their different brands of car, coupled to an electronic automatic 5-speed box, that would only get sort of low 30s, upper 20s in terms of economy. And it has to be said, whilst the claims 61, I think is what MG say, you can get if you're very lucky on the MG, but it's still better. You'll still get into the upper 30s and low 40s in day-to-day driving. So you do see a big cost benefit from the hybrid drivetrain. And as Miles explained, the benefit is that the motor is doing a lot more of the heavy lifting than would be the case with a normal self-charging hybrid. So you can, in certain road conditions, you can really see the economy. You know, I've seen in summer months over 70 miles to the gallon on steady drives. So it can be economical, but the main thing is for the money, you just can't beat it. It's thousands less than anything else with the same level of equipment.
Right, fantastic. Okay, so great. So you started to go into some of the benefits as you see it. Anne and David, have you had similar or different experiences with fuel economy, or has it depended on what you're doing?
It's been quite cold recently, and I found that the economy was still good, but just in the last 2 days, where it's really warmed up a bit, yesterday or the day before yesterday, I couldn't believe it. I got 63 in the ZS, and I wasn't doing anything. I mean, I wasn't behaving any differently driving it, you know. So I was real chuffed about that, you know, because I was, you know, when I've driven. For argument's sake, the Jazz or I've even had a Toyota Yaris. I have reached those kind of miles per gallon, and when I got the MG3, that wasn't doing too bad either. And then the ZS, wasn't doing as good, and I felt a bit disappointed. But then all of a sudden, weather changed, and yeah, suddenly it was great. I think, as somebody said, if you tweak, there's certain things that you can tweak that make things a bit better across the board. Really,
Right.
it's just
Yes.
a matter of
Yes.
knowing a little bit of what you're about.
Sure. So, Miles, would that be down to temperature of the battery or differences that people see there? What would cause that?
I mean, obviously, if it's very frosty out, same as with an EV, you can use a lot of energy for the actual heating of the car. Now, the engine has to start on a hybrid to create the heat. It doesn't have an electric heater like the ZS EV does, for example. Although actually the HS PHEV now does have an electric heater, so you can, in cold weather, you can just run off the electric. Even with the old HS PHEV, it had to start the engine even if the battery was fully charged if it was winter. But yeah, so basically, I mean, yeah, engines will have to run, which if you're going to de-ice the car or if it's cold weather, you're going to have the heating on more. It's going to take slightly more energy. I think the major factor really is probably that you're going to have like your air conditioning on to try demisting the car quite a lot, so that's going to affect things as well. And general things in cold weather is that air is slightly denser, so that has an effect on the actual wind resistance against the car. The tyres, often moving through water and things, will create more drag on the tyres, so that's another thing. I mean, yeah, I think that the thing with the tricks that you can do as such with the hybrids is sometimes a very slight movement of your accelerator pedal, just easing off ever so slightly, can have a massive difference on your actual MPG.
I agree.
It can be that a 5% difference or 10% difference in the actual pedal input doesn't really affect your speed, but it just changes the logic effectively of what the car's trying to do. So rather than having it sort of, it's trying to hold a gear to then give you a bit more acceleration, a bit more power. If you ease off ever so slightly, it goes, okay, I'll shift into this. I'll shift the next cog up, and I'll just back off slightly, and it just puts it under slightly less load. So sometimes it's just a case of just, and again, it's more sort of you can use the instant MPG readout on the car or the power gauges to sort of see whether how that little effect might affect. And sometimes it can make less than 1 mile per hour difference, but it just makes a big difference on your fuel efficiency overall.
Yeah, and on that, Miles, so just so people know who aren't familiar, so it's not like the 3-speed automatic. You can't select which gear. The system does it for you.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's why you're having to give it a hint or nudge with the throttle in order to get it to change up or down or whatever. David, how's your economy experience been? How have you found your ZS?
I was getting 74.
I know you haven't been able to use it that much, but yeah.
Yeah, no, we used it a lot. And had the HS in between because there's a 7-year warranty. The car up, so whilst the car was being repaired.
You've got the MG3, haven't you, David?
No, I've got the MG ZS, which I think is the same as yours. And bizarrely, I had the Toyota Yaris before, which is a smaller cabin to heat up miles in terms of. So I've been driving around with the
had a toy before.
Yeah, I loved it. I've been driving around with the aircon off to get better mileage because I find if the battery's low, Miles, and you're just going up a slight gradient at 20 miles per hour, the engine starts to roar at you and it revs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Really revs like hell, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's fun. And then I was in Scotland the other day on the Erskine Bridge. Say the other day, it would be January the 13th or 14th, thereabouts. And there was snow in the Eaglesham area, the south of Belfast. And all of a sudden, the car revved to about 6.5, trying to get to 7,000 RPM. And I thought the darn thing was going to blow up. My wife was driving, so I videoed it on the mobile phone. Took it into Stirling, Arnold Clark, and they drove it around. By this time, of course, the car's warmed up, the cabin's warmed up, and they said, no, there's nothing wrong with that. So I asked them about the PD052 update, and appears not to be in the UK, although it's in Europe. In saying that, somebody in Wales and somebody in Swindon has had this update. This may be a conversation for later, Tom, I don't know.
No, that's fine. Carry on with it, but we might as well talk about it now.
So I mean, loads of people have been in touch with me about this particular car and the over-revving problem. And the PDO 5.2 update, if you've already got it on your car, but it's not showing up as you've got it, it overwrites it and creates an even bigger problem. And if you haven't got it, 90-odd% of the time, it seems to fix the problem. And the revving, the deselecting the gears or not selecting the gear, whatever might be going on that slight gradient, the 20 miles per hour or a greater gradient, seems to be solved. But it tends only to happen, Miles, when the hybrid battery is running at low on the visual display, and then you're asking to get up this hill, and the car starts roaring with revs, saying, well, I haven't got the power to do that.
Yep. If I can add, I experience exactly what David and Anne are talking about, but I do wonder if in warmer weather, I live in Harrow, which I've mentioned, but it's Harrow on the Hill, which is essentially means that I have to drive up a hill from whichever direction to get home. So I'm always driving up a hill. And I don't remember in the summer months the revving being quite so noticeable. But to coincide with the weather cooling down a bit, I had a problem with an engine emissions fault, which is due to a faulty EGR valve, which is another topic entirely. And I wonder when it first went in to have that fault investigated, whether they reprogrammed the ECU because there were some stories, I think in Australia, where owners were complaining, and in Europe as well, where owners were complaining they had no power going up a hill. So I'm wondering if MG tweaked the software to make sure that the drivetrain will select a lower gear, and I think second gear it's selecting, to make sure that the battery's still got plenty of charge in it to power the motor to get the car up the hill. The other side of the coin is you get the higher revs. And I'm sure everyone, if not, there's actually on the display, you can actually bring up where the power is being distributed, and it shows the engine revs as well. And I sort of religiously watch this display. And on average, it's 2,600 RPM when I'm going up a hill to get home. Whereas in normal day-to-day driving, it will be 1,300 RPM. And I am firmly of the belief it's because the box is changing down to second, as David says, to charge up the battery to make sure the motor's got enough oomph to get you up the hill.
Okay,
so
shall we give Miles a chance just to respond to that so far? Yeah. And there's more to say, but thanks, David.
So I've just been looking through the bulletins. There's no actual after-sales bulletins come out to dealers about this issue individually.
In the UK,
so, yeah. In the UK. So any updates that have been done by other dealers will be on the back of what we call service now cases, which is basically when an individual car has an issue and they raise a technical case and then send it through to MG, and that gets responded to individually rather than as a bulletin where it's, go do this to all the cars. So at the moment, it would appear that, like you said, the PDO 52, whatever it's called, update that you've seen in other countries, hasn't been rolled out in the UK. And I suspect part of that is due to this issue where it sounds like some cars have had the update and it's not been configured properly, which means that therefore it's making the issue worse. Or some of them haven't had the update and they're fine, and some of them have had the update and it's not.
Very bad though, isn't it? It really is. It doesn't speak volumes for MG, to be honest.
So yeah, I think that what we've seen with other issues with software basis, which this is a software issue rather than the engine. I think it's basically it's the logic of how it's changing the gears. So what we've usually seen with this is that they do some test cases with certain vehicles, check how that runs for a few weeks, see if there's any further faults reported on the back of that, and then they start to roll it out more wholesale. So if you've got a service coming up in the next few months, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an update that's rolled out by that point.
And Miles, would MG UK be wanting to do this testing in the UK with UK examples separately from what's happened elsewhere in the world, or would...
Yeah, usually, because again, it depends on climate, it depends on temperature, it depends on topography, and we've got a slightly different, certainly with different climate to Australia most of the year. So I think that
understand that some of it going up a hill and not being able to overtake when you need to, etc., becomes quite dangerous. And
totally, totally.
Yeah.
So
the MG service departments are not really, I'm frightened about taking my car in for anything now, because I've heard some real horror stories that MG really don't care as an after service.
Well, I'd say, so obviously I work for a dealership, so I'm going to stick up for them a little bit. But what I would say is that the thing that needs doing basically is the service now case needs raising for whichever vehicle. So if you've got an issue with your car, you give examples of it, and you take it into the dealership, and you say, look, I've got this issue. What doesn't work, and we've seen this before, is when people go into the dealership and say, I want the PD052 update that I've seen is available in Ireland or Australia or whatever, because that means nothing to the guys in the workshop. They don't have any. It doesn't link up to anything that they've got on their bulletin boards. It doesn't have anything on their diagnostic tools. So what they need to basically just do is you just say, look, these are the symptoms I've got. This is the issue. Please, can you raise a technical case with MG UK? And they do, on the whole, come back very quickly to us, and they will often say, okay, well, can you try updating the power delivery module, PD? Would you update also this ECU, and road test and see how it goes? One thing I'll say in the defence is that it's not every car that's affected like this. So I've driven the ZS Hybrid and the MG3 Hybrid, and I've taken them through the Trough of Bowland, which is quite a hilly area in the sort of northwest, and I've driven each car for sort of over 100 miles up and down hills and everything, and not had any issues whatsoever with the lack of power or with the engine rev. So
that's such high miles, but and I have heard that revving on a flat, not on a hill, but it soon goes, and you can sort of be forgiven for just sort of letting it drop and forget about it, because the car drives wonderful otherwise.
So one of the things about
but it's the MG server. I mean, when I had a Toyota, for instance, you make an appointment with them, and they give you an appointment for a short time later, days or weeks. But there's a lot of scare stories coming out, not about the car. There are cars.
Yes, exactly.
What I can say, Anne, is, because obviously I had the MG4 a couple of years ago, and I've had it for 2 years now. I love the car, but it hasn't been without a few problems. But what I have found is that MG have come through with fixes for all of the key problems that I've had or other people I've seen on the forums have had. But it doesn't always happen straight away. If you're one of the early adopters or early when the problem is raised, it can take time, as Miles says, for testing and diagnosis and for a fix to be rolled out. But I just want to reassure you that I haven't. It's not my experience, and I've been quite critical in the past of things, as Miles knows, through my experiences. It's not been my experience that MG don't care or that they don't come up with a fix. It can often be more about whether or not how long that takes and what communication you get from MG in the meantime, which isn't always.
If I can just ask Miles a question. When he said that he's driven the hybrid cars up hills, can he say that when he goes up the hill, depending on the steepness, does he say that the revs do not go up to maybe 2.5, 2,600 or higher, or does it stay at around 1,800 or 19 or 2,000? Has he experienced a higher revving? Yes or no?
Yes, I have experienced higher revving, as I have in all hybrid cars that I've driven from all brands. Bear in mind, I've been driving hybrid cars and electric cars now since 2008. So
sure.
With what I'd say with regards to the high revs, one thing you need to appreciate with a hybrid car, and particularly one like the Hybrid Plus, is that the engine doesn't really have a direct connection to the wheels. It's basically working as a generator to charge up the battery for the electric motor to work. So when the electric motor's under a high load, that's when the engine will have to rev quite a lot, or when the battery's low.
Ordinarily, with a hybrid, Master, sorry to interrupt. Ordinarily, with a hybrid, you've got a CVT box, and the high revs are a result of the CVT box and its behaviour in what is effectively what they used to call a rubber band box, causing the engine revs to soar when you ask for a high degree of acceleration. So that's normally the problem that people experience with hybrids. Toyotas were renowned for that, that when you went to accelerate hard, you'd have a cacophony of engine noise because the CVT box was trying to catch up with the sudden increase in engine revs. This is a torque converter box in the MG3. And it's my guess that because it is having to change down to second, that is just, I think, a characteristic. I don't honestly believe that MG are going to be able to get around it because it's just the very nature of the structure of the drivetrain. But if I could just go away from that for 1 second, just talking about MG service, I mentioned that I had an engine emission sort. That took 3 attempts for my local dealer to sort out each time. And the dealer was very, very honest. In fairness, sorry, the technician was very honest. I could actually read the technician's notes. And he was speaking to MG Technical. And first time MG Technical came back with a software update, which was supposed to sort the issue. It didn't. The second time, he actually suggested to MG Technical, should he change the EGR valve, which he believed to be at fault. MG Technical said, no, don't do that. Just do another software update. That lasted about a month before the problem returned again. And in fact, before the problem returned again, my dealer got back in touch with me and said, oh, MG Technical have now said we need to replace the EGR valve because they had a faulty batch of these components. So you could, if you're being sort of cynical, you could think, well, MG Technical are saying, we don't want to have to pay for EGR valves if we don't have to. So let's try another software update. And only when it became apparent that a lot of other owners were experiencing the same issue, that MG probably got in touch with the parts supplier and said, you know, you've sold us a duff load of EGR valves. And the supply, and that they obviously had the evidence because they could show, and I discussed it with somebody in service, and you could actually see the valve was not behaving properly. And no doubt MG would have gone back to the parts supplier in China and said, look, you can see these valves aren't working as they should. This is a duff batch. And the supplier had to replace them at their cost. So MG were fine. Yeah, you know, let's replace the valves. It's not costing us anything. The more the merrier. Every car that we can track down with this fault, we can replace the valve. It won't really cost us because we're charging our parts supplier for the failure in the component. But if I can, I'll say it very, very briefly. That brings me on to a final point, which I've raised at length on the forum, regarding the tyre fiasco.
Right.
And,
can we come back? Can we come back to the tyres?
Sure. Okay. All right. Okay. Fair enough.
I know everyone's got things they want to raise and things that happen to their cars. Sure. That's fine, and we can do that.
Yes.
But I want to give Miles a chance to respond to that.
Sure.
I'm not sure we're finished on the earlier issue either.
Absolutely. Of course.
Miles.
Okay. So in reply to Keith about the EGR valve thing, I think you're surmising correctly is that the thing is as well is that if you're in a workshop and they say, okay, I think we've got a faulty EGR valve, we've got a case of I'll order a part, it's going to be here 48 hours, so you don't actually necessarily have one on the shelf in your parts department. So MG are probably going to say try a software update first before they post out a part. Not so much because of the cost of the part, but more because it's something you can do there and then whilst the car's in the workshop. It's physically there, whereas you'd have to wait 48 hours, find the time, to then find the workshop time to be able to do it. So that's common because a lot of brands, to be fair, it's just, if a software update might fix it, do the software update first because it's quick. With regards to the EGR valve problem, I think you've surmised correctly is that, if there's a faulty badge, they will have gone back to the supplier and they will be claiming the hours back from them for the replacing them as well.
miles.
And
Cars that are less than, I mean, my car, my MG3, I actually had to get rid of that car after less than 3 months. And I really liked it. Overall, mostly it was brilliant. It was an amazing car. I mean, inside was had everything I wanted, and it was a good car. But it had some very weird problems, and I think MG, they've missed the point here. That I think they didn't realise that all their cars were suddenly going to really sell so well, and they haven't really got the staff who are knowledgeable in MG to deal with it. I mean, for instance, a very, very simple thing that happened, and it's happened to numerous people on the forums, is the light coming on to say that there is a fault, a fuel fault or something. Now,
the engine emission fault.
Yeah, right. So I read on there, mine came up, my light came on, and I thought, oh, yeah, here we go, And somebody suggested over tightening the petrol cap so that it really made a very uncomfortable sound. Like normally you're told, don't overdo things, but with this, you had to overdo it. So when you turn the petrol cap, you really had to turn it so it really clunked. And my emission light never came on again. But other people have found that it comes on all the time. And when I took my car to the dealer and told him about it, he put it on one of these laptops to look at it. And whilst he never found any fault, he actually put his laptop on top of my dashboard and scratched it. And they were supposed to deal with it, fix it, that scratch. But as well as the emission light, I had a scratch on the dashboard. They never ever fixed. They never ever came back to me to fix it.
So just hold on a sec, David. We'll come to you, David, after.
Very busy.
Sorry, and just with regards to the petrol flap, so that's a common issue on a lot of new petrol cars. So I've actually just had the same issue with a VW T-Roc this last week, where it was showing up as an evap system fault, and it's just the seal on the petrol fuel cap. So the way that the cars work now is that they actually have an evaporation system built into the injection. So basically, any unburnt fuel can be recirculated back to the fuel pipe. There's literally a pipe that goes all the way back from the engine. A little fine breather pipe effectively goes back to the fuel system. Now, if the fuel cap's not on properly, then this gaseous fuel basically can leak from the system. So it's rather than returning to the tank. So that causes an issue.
I agree.
That causes an error.
Very simple fixes. I absolutely agree with you.
But
the fact that it shows you 100 miles an hour in a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, that you can go 100 miles an hour, they're all very easy fixes. There's lots of them come up now and then, like the big ping that comes on the outside of the car. I don't know, it sounds like a radio electrical thing, but it only comes now and then. So when you get to the dealership, it doesn't show up. But the thing is, they're very easy, but it doesn't help you when the light comes on or something of that kind, and it says you've got to stop the car, you can't use it, and then MG tell you that they can't take it in for 3 weeks, and they may have done it for another 3 weeks.
So the reason why it comes up with that message saying don't drive the car anymore is because when it's an evap system fault, it creates additional emissions. So because of the emissions regulations that we have nowadays, if we've got unburnt fuel being ejected into the atmosphere, it's considered that it's not safe to drive for the emissions point of view. So whilst the car would actually drive perfectly well,
that's
the rule, I guess. David, I do want to come to you because you've been waiting patiently. You had something you want to say?
Miles. Sorry, it sounds like we're all going to go at Miles tonight.
That's all right, Anne. I understand. But David,
it's my job.
Miles, I think your knowledge is fascinating, and I'm not here to go at you or MG. What I'm here for is to discuss the problems without pointing any fingers, Anne, and certainly not pointing any fingers at Miles, who's been brilliant, I would say. The MG EV plus hybrid thing, ZS, that I've got, some of the people on the forum are finding no problems with the revving. A lot of people are having not only problems, but there are some that are having horrendous problems with the revving.
Yeah.
The car, for its money, the cabin, the gadgets, the amount of boot space, it's all fantastic.
Exactly.
Absolutely agree.
The engine could be better insulated, so we can't hear this high revving, but then the revometer tells us that we're going up to 6,500 revs, and that's slightly worrying.
Yeah.
I'm not here to knock where the speedometer should be or how, you know. My interest is in why are some cars experience this and some not. And although my car and others are performing so much better at miles, and actually the battery's refilling faster and milder temperature, the revving has become less of a concern. The mileage has got up, but this revving problem has happened in Australia. I understand that they have winter there. They ski in their winter, but you know, it's generally considered a hotter country, and they've been experiencing it on their roads, which is a completely different climate. Spain, Europe in general, Germany, France have all had various updates that well, certainly there's one, the famous PD052. That update doesn't seem to exist, or as Miles highlighted earlier, he alluded to the fact that the dealer or the senior technician in the service department wouldn't particularly know the number or the name of that. He would just do what MG Technical are advising him to do without looking at what numbers what. But it's a problem with this car, and it's highly disappointing because the car's brilliant.
Do you have an answer for that?
Well, it's
Miles,
a worry, isn't it? Because you think it might be damaging your engine.
Yeah, I get the concern, and I think people are right to have a concern. But Miles, do you have an explanation for why some cars would be like that and some wouldn't?
So one factor that affects it, basically there's about 100 ECUs on the car, and when they're built, they'll all be put with a certain level of software. Now, when they get brought to the UK, some dealers will start to update some of the ECUs on PDI, and some dealers will leave them alone. The received wisdom is that you don't update anything if it ain't broken. Well, sometimes they might have done an update on something, but then, as we said before, the way that the update system works, it's not like Microsoft Windows Update. You don't just press update and it does it for you. You have to tell it ECU by ECU. You have to download the update, install the update, then you've got to download and install a config file for that update, otherwise the update fails. And then often some updates require other updates to happen to other ECUs as well. So basically, you're opening Pandora's box when you start doing one update, because you've often got to do more than just the one. And so why some cars will be doing it and some aren't, I would imagine that it's down to different levels of software on different ECUs. So it might be that, for example, the power delivery module might have, I'll use simple numbers just because they never are, but so that might be on version 3. The main computer ECU for the body system might be on ECU version 2. But the PD version 3 requires the body computer to be on version 3 as well, otherwise it won't communicate properly. So that can be an issue. That can be a reason why certain cars have certain issues, basically, and that's why as well it's difficult sometimes for us to do a wholesale sort of well, every car needs to have PD over 52, for example, because if they don't have also the BCM updated and they don't have this updated, then it can mean that it doesn't work in the prescribed way. Do you think that, Miles,
that it's damaging the car when it starts revving the hell out of itself? Do you think?
No. So one thing is that so the engines in hybrid cars, particularly MG hybrids, run on a different engine cycle to a traditional engine. Traditional engines use an Otto cycle, which is where the intake and outtake strokes of the engine are identical. These use a different. Sorry, you're saying, Keith?
Atkinson cycle, is it?
There's an Atkinson cycle. There's another. The other one is the. Oh God, I've forgotten the name. There's an Atkinson cycle. And there's another one.
Right. I thought they used the Atkinson cycle.
I'm trying to remember which.
No, I've come across another one as well, but I can't help.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one.
Well, we'll come back to the
let's
name.
Let's say it's the Atkinson cycle, yeah. But it's basically it's where it can modify it for additional power but lower emissions.
Yeah. But can I just say, Miles, just to clear the water a bit here, the sort of revving up to 2,600 driving up a hill. That I think is the correct characteristic of the drive.
Correct, yeah. If it's revving to 6,000, that is
that is a fault. Yeah, that is a fault, and that is a fault that MG should be dealing with.
Yes, I think we're all agreed on that. Well, let's go back to Miles with an Atkinson cycle or whatever the name is. What's the difference in terms of its ability to rev and whether it would cause harm? Because that's the question that Anne's asking.
So, well, basically, with a petrol engine, when it's with an Atkinson cycle or a Miller cycle, that's the other one. It basically it's more of a diesel cycle. With the diesel engine, obviously, you might have seen where diesel does get engine oil and fuel coming through into the cylinders, and then it does go into overrun. But generally speaking, they've got like a limiter on them, a hard limiter, which you can't exceed. Now, I come from a background previously of small Italian cars, which 6,500 RPM is pretty much where you need to be to get a Fiat Cinquecento to go anywhere. So in many ways, engines can and do, and if you've come from a Honda before, they also do like to rev as well. 6,500 is not ideal. It shouldn't be on there all the time, but for brief periods, say up to a minute at a time, it's not going to destroy itself. Having said that, it's not ideal.
But Miles, I would suggest 6,500 RPM. That is putting excessive wear on all the components in the engine. Yes, the VTEC engines that Honda used to use would rev up to goodness knows what else, and Italian engines, as you say, have always been high revving in Fiats and Alfas, etc. But 6,500 RPM in a, shall we say, bog standard Super Mini or bog standard SUV is not right. It is a fault, and we can dress it any way we like. But you should not be revving your engine for that.
It shouldn't be doing it. No, it shouldn't be doing it. Is it going to destroy the engine? It shouldn't do. No, but is it going to? Is it right? No.
Can I venture a quick hypothesis? I'm just wondering here is because, from what we've been saying earlier, hybrids in general will have to rev the engine somewhat in order to recharge the battery. And so that there's power for you to do what you're driving. So as we've talked about, maybe 2,000, 2,300, 2,600, it could happen. Because MG have got these large, higher power motors and slightly bigger batteries than most traditional hybrids, is that actually causing this problem? Because you're getting the great performance, but therefore the energy demand is much higher. And therefore the need to potentially rev high to recharge the battery is more common or more often.
I was just
wondering if that's part of it.
So I would say
I'm really sorry to interrupt, Miles. Can I just say one thing? Is this the fundamental nature of the drivetrain? Because unlike with most rechargeable hybrids, the petrol engine is doing most of the lifting. But with this particular drivetrain, as I understand it, you have a separate motor, which is actually being used as a generator, unlike with other self-charging hybrids, to actually purely charge up the battery, because the way MG thought the whole program through was that they wanted the battery and the electric motor to have sufficient power to be able to drive the car for longer distances than would ordinarily be the case with a self-charging hybrid. And because of that, the petrol engine is having to rev harder to spin the generator motor, to charge the battery, to drive the electric motor, to drive the wheels of the car. So it's working in a subtle but different way to your standard self-charge hybrid, where you might get 1 or 2 miles of pure electric driving.
In that case, Keith, in terms of what you're saying, it is correct. Now, again, it shouldn't be revving over 3,500 RPM.
No, sure.
But it will rev more, and this is similar to the Nissan e-Power system. So Nissan have an e-Power system on the Qashqai and the X-Trail, which basically the electric motor always drives the car, and there's no mechanical link whatsoever between the engine and
the is just a generator,
and the petrol engine is purely a generator. And the So with an e-power system, we tend to find that we get the engine running whenever the car basically decides it wants to. So I've had it before with the e-power where, like, you're driving just slowly, stop-start traffic, like, for example, like a McDonald's drive-through queue, and you get to the window and suddenly the engine decides it wants to do 3,000 RPM and hold it because the battery had dropped down so low that it just suddenly decided it wanted to.
Really?
That was because of the air conditioning on and everything else. So that was the Nissan e-power system.
Wow.
So that does happen in that system. And I think that probably there's a very similarity, with the MG Hybrid Plus system, because whilst it does have an engine, the majority of the power that the engine provides is purely as a generation of electricity.
Yep.
It does have a mechanical link. It can assist the electric
On
motor with driving the
motorways, for
car.
example. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep, it would
but
be.
in terms of actually the way that it works, it's more of a series hybrid rather than a parallel hybrid in many ways.
Yes, yes, and you can actually see in day-to-day driving, if you watch the tachometer, the engine will be spinning over at 1300 RPM steadily, because the electric motor is actually driving the car forward, is propelling the car. The 1300 RPMs are not being used to propel the car; they're being used purely to charge the battery, to drive the motor, to move the car forward. So I understand that concept. But do you think, if you're being really, really honest, take your MG hat off, that there could have been a better way with maybe a 4-speed torque converter box to be able to provide engine power to charge the battery? Or do you think, no, whatever, it would have to change down to second gear, even if it was a 4-speed torque converter box, because only in second gear does the engine provide enough torque to charge to spin the generator motor?
I've got to be honest, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that they could have put a 5-speed box on it, and that would have given obviously more ratios, more possibilities and things.
You can't really say, can you? I mean,
whether a 4-speed would have cured it, I don't know. But
we all bought this car for economy, So some things aren't going to be perfect. Just sadly, this revving problem does appear to be a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. We're coming. We've actually almost done our full hour, so we'll need to finish soon. So
about the warranty, are you happy that the warranty is a true warranty? Because I've
fit for purpose.
Pardon?
Fit for purpose.
I was very worried about that. That's something else has come up. The 7-year warranty sounds fantastic, but lots of people have gone through it with their dealership, and it actually is like a wolf in sheep's clothing,
Yes.
Well, I mean, MG's warranty is on their website. The warranty statement for all the MG cars.
It's the same for all EVs. Is it the same for hybrids as EVs, Miles? I know the EV one is the same for all EVs.
Yeah, it's been the same since 2021 as well. So,
but
it's for all electric and hybrid vehicles.
Miles, can I just forgive me, Tom, and if you tell me to shut up, of course I will. The issue I had with the tyres does speak volumes about, in my opinion, a disappointing approach that MG UK and sadly my dealership adopt to customer care, because and I've written volumes on the forum. In essence, I got a puncture, and the Kumo Solus HS63 tyres that the MG3 are fitted with were only available in Australia. Kumo did bring a small amount into the UK when the MG3 was launched. And that was because I rang Kumo and said, well, how can I get one of these tyres? And they said, well, you can't. It's only available in Australia, because the car was intended primarily for the Australian market. That was when I first bought the car. I had a puncture. The tyre was repairable, so that problem went away. Sadly, I got another puncture more recently. I went to look on the internet, as Kumo reliably informed me I would be able to find a Solus HS63 tyre without any problem, because they're bringing them into the country, only to discover there were no tyres in the country. And when I spoke to Kumo, they said, they're not only no tyres in the country, the tyre has now become obsolete. So I spoke to the sales manager at my dealership, my selling dealership, and he couldn't agree with me more. He said, yes, it's absolutely terrible. In order to remain safe, you shouldn't mix even Kumo models of tyre on one axle, you should have the same make and model of tyre on each axle. You can't mix. Legally you can, and there's no legal issue with doing that, but in terms of safety, it can cause a problem. So the sales manager said, you're absolutely right. It's terrible that you have to buy, in effect, 2 tyres to sort out one puncture. And I said, well, what do you think? He said, well, I'll talk to the regional manager, but I doubt she's going to do anything because MG won't want to have to start to replace tyres. Surprise, surprise, the next day he came back and said, no, she'll have nothing to do with it. I said, well, can you offer me anything? Free service, a discount, because I'm having to buy 2 tyres to replace one puncture tyre. He said, no, I'm not going to offer you a single thing. I said, but are you quite happy to continue to sell these cars out of your showroom? And he went and checked that the MG3 sitting in his showroom had this same obsolete tyre. I said, are you happy to sell this car knowing that if a customer buys this car, drives out the showroom, gets a puncture, he or she's going to have to buy 2 tyres? He said, it's nothing to do with me. I have no legal obligation to tell the customer about the tyres. As far as I'm concerned, all I want to do is sell the car. I spoke to MG customer service, and the first person I spoke to was very sympathetic. It was late on in the day, and he said, yes, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have to buy 2 tyres for one puncture. I'll talk to the powers that be. There must be something we can do. I'll come back to you in the morning. I said, well, make sure you do, because I've got to sort this out because I can't drive my car. I've got a punctured tyre. He didn't call me back. Later on in the day, after I went ahead and bought 2 Goodyear tyres, I rang him up and I rang up customer service. Unfortunately, he answered the phone. And suddenly, from being very sympathetic, the drawbridge had been pulled up. And he said, yes, you could tell he'd been coached now as to what to say to the customers with this problem, because he obviously said the wrong thing to me the previous day, being sympathetic. He said, yes, I didn't ring you this morning because I've been very busy. I said, okay, well, what's the upshot? You said you'd be able to look into what you can do. He said, as far as MG are concerned, we advise that you do not mix and match your tyres on the same axle. I said, but it's not fair that I have to buy 2 tyres because you're supplying cars in the UK with obsolete, tyres that were only available in Australia and are now obsolete. He said, as far as MG are concerned, we are not obliged to supply 2 tyres. Sorry?
What did you do in the end?
Can we get to the denouement? What was the final outcome?
Yes, I'll get straight to it. In the end, MG basically said, you're on your own. We know it's a problem, but you're on your own. The dealership said, yes, we know it's a problem. You're on your own. We won't even give you a discount on the next service. And furthermore, we're not going to say a word to any future customers regarding these cars that have these tyres. And in fact, the ZS, I saw a ZS in an MG showroom that also had the same
tyre. Okay, Miles, your response, your reaction.
So this isn't the first time that I've heard about this from a car brand where tyres go obsolete. For example, Porsche, they have N-rated tyres. Porsches say that you shouldn't mix, no mind mixing the brand of the tyre, the N rating on the tyre, which is effectively it's N1, N2, N3, N4. The N rating is basically the batch number of the tyre. And they say you shouldn't match batches. So I had a colleague who had a Porsche Cayenne Turbo S, and he got a puncture, and it was an all-wheel drive as well, obviously. And so he went to get a puncture. He needed a tyre, and they said, "Okay, well, you've got N3s on your car, but they're obsolete now. We can only get N4s." He says, fine, just stick an N4 on it. And he ended up saying, well, actually, no, you can't put an N3 and an N4 on the same axle. And actually, because yours is all-wheel drive and it's got 400 odd horsepower, you actually shouldn't put N-rating tyres different on any of the wheels. So you need to change all 4 tyres. It was £2,500 for a set of 4 tyres. So it's... And I know that the MG is a different kettle of fish.
My previous car from the Genesis was a Maserati. They fit MGT spec tyres, OEM MGT tyres. They're made by Pirelli. They're Pirelli P0s, And those tyres are specific for Maserati. They were designed as OEM tyres to be suitable for that car. My Genesis, that has, I think it's Michelin GOE, Genesis Original Equipment tyres, and that is what Genesis would recommend to your car. The point is this, though, Miles. Why is it that when I needed to buy a tyre for my Maserati, there wasn't any problem in getting the tyre? They said, yes, we can supply you with the tyre. With Genesis, yes, we can supply you with the tyre. With
so that's the funder. Just for time, Keith. So the fundamental issue is why wasn't the tyre available that it was sold with in the market?
Yes.
Any thoughts on that, Miles? We are going to have to close, guys, because we're over time.
ZS, and they do them. I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, Kumho makes the tyres, so obviously this is one part of the supply chain that SAIC doesn't control. The SAIC makes their own batteries, they make their own panels, they make a lot of things. The tyres is one thing they don't have the control over. Now,
Miles, if I bought my MG3 from you and I came into the showroom and said, I've got a puncture, what am I going to do? Would you say, well, you've got to buy 2 tyres? Would you think, was that what you would say to me?
To be perfectly honest, on a car which has got 150 horsepower, just less, I would probably, if it was my own car, I'd put 1 tyre on it, and I wouldn't care if it had different tread to the tyre opposite.
Although it does
that's me doing 20,000 miles a year, and I get through quite some tyres. But in terms of I mean, if you want to keep the same, if you want to have the same tyre tread on both, you would have to swap both tyres. Is it fair? No. Is it right that you can't get the tyre? No.
It makes you
but ultimately, I can't. If you come to me and say, I need a Kumho whatever tyre, and there isn't physically any in the world, I can't magic one up. So it's.
But
you would probably offer Keith something in presumably offer him a discount service. You look after
the tyres at cost or something. I do the tyres at cost or something. Yeah. I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I would
it does
try
sound
and,
like
I try and have some goodwill. Yeah. So.
It doesn't sound like you've had the best dealer experience there, Keith. And so,
Keith, not that I want to name and shame, but
it's not just Keith. It's not just Keith.
But one of the things that we've got
sales is absolutely terrible. Really.
So one thing we've got on the forum is there is a dealer review section on the forum where you can discuss what's happened with it. And I would recommend that people, if they have had an experience, good or bad, that they put a review on there so that other people know before they buy the car, they can see that sort of feedback on there. And thankfully, my Chorley group has currently got pretty good feedback on all of our sales and after sales.
And although I've had that little bit of high revving at times, the car has been absolutely faultless. I absolutely love it, and that's saying something from a lady who has had more cars than hot dinners.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I've had the Jazz, the Toyota Yaris, the MG3, the H, the
MG3 and the ZS Hybrid, I think, are exactly the same engine. Tom, you disagreed with this the other day, so I looked.
No. Miles clarified it tonight. He said
Tom, you mentioned we didn't get time. The lane assist. I use lane assist and adaptive cruise control all the time. You said that MG have made a modification or an update to the lane assist.
So there was a case that went to the Vehicle Standards Agency. A lot of people complained about it being potentially dangerous. So it's another issue, like you're saying. I'm overtaking and I've got no power. That's potentially dangerous, or it could hurt the car, the engine revving. That's dangerous. A number of people found that the tug on the wheel was quite sharp, and if you weren't holding the wheel tightly, that could be potentially dangerous. So early on, MG did software updates to improve this, and I eventually got one of those because the problem is not just them doing the update; it's then you getting the update, as we've talked about.
Sure.
And that improved it, but it was still a pain, so I was turning it off. But I've received the final update, which is the one that's supposed to take care of it. And it does work perfectly now. It does exactly what it has done on other cars from the start, which is a gentle nudge. You can feel it, but it doesn't upset you. And it copes. I've been driving it in the dark, in the driving rain and wind this weekend and all sorts, and it's not misbehaving. But it has taken 2 years to get that fix.
And do you find that when you've got the lane MG Pilot, as it's called, switched on, that if you're going on a more narrow road and they've parked cars, that it will slam on the brakes?
Well, that's so that's the automatic emergency braking.
Yes.
I do have a problem with that. I tend to turn that off still. Or I turn it to alert, so I get the warning, but not the braking action.
Yeah.
Because it only happens at slow speeds because it's disabled at high speeds. That
we've
function.
got these cars that have got all these fantastic things in, but we've turned them all off.
Well, yeah,
I use it all the time.
we didn't buy them for those things.
It is the way of the world, unfortunately, and a lot of them are required by regulation. So it's not MG saying, "Oh, let's just put all this stuff on the car."
No,
but yeah, I have to say, although MG have been bad for this, a lot of other makes have had lots of problems with these systems too.
Yeah,
People have
it's
not unique to MG.
David, how is your ZS? How are you finding it? How are you finding your ZS?
Right. Okay. I had a problem with it, Anne. They kept it for 30 days from me after day one, but that was because there was a sealed unit for the gearbox, and it didn't have enough oil in it.
Oh, right.
So MG Roadside Assist, in the guise of the AA man, came out and said, "Oh, it's lighting up 6 problems here. You better get it in. In fact, try and get them to come and pick it up." So I took it in and spoke to MG Birmingham a few times whilst the car was there, saying, "Look, it's been there for a week and nobody's touched it, etc., etc." And then they couldn't get hold of MG Technical because they only seemed to work for 3 days a week at the time. So it was coming up to Christmas, I suppose. Anyway, I got the car back, and no, I'm not happy with the MG. I took it right back to Stirling. Now I live in County Antrim, which I live by the seaside in a secret place in Ireland. And took it over on the ferry, went to Stirling, said, "Look, it's your car, take it back. I'm sick to death of it." They took it out for a drive, and of course I'd driven it there. It was warmed up. Everything was working perfectly. They said, there's nothing wrong with this car as far as we can see, Mr. Turnbull. And I go, "Oh, God." And it's gone over the 30-day mark to return the vehicle at this point. So I was a bit stuck, even though they'd had the vehicle. Anyway, so putting that aside, since the bad temperatures, and we were in 4.5 degrees temperature here. Let me just put my thing on. So we were in 4.5 degrees temperature here. We're in about 9.5 degrees now. And the batteries are recharging faster. The revs have become less of a pain in the neck, but they were bizarrely high. They still are. But I do a particular journey, and by the time the battery's running low, I'm going up a back lane with houses on one side, the middle of the countryside, and I'm only doing 20 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, and the car starts screaming at me. It roars with its revs, and said, "I haven't got enough power to do your aircon," so I turned the aircon off. "I haven't got enough power to recharge your battery because you're not giving me enough throttle because I'm crawling up a hill." I'm crawling up a hill.
That's the problem.
A sheep or a chicken could jump out in front of me. It could be somebody's child. So of course you're crawling up the hill, and it's saying this isn't good for me, and it just gives me these big, frightening revs. But it's got better since the temperature improved.
It's murder, though, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible.
Toyota has
a fundamental problem.
30 years
very fundamental
to play around with these problems. And the MG Hybrid, everybody on the forum speaking about this PDO 5.2 update that nobody's ever heard of, but some people seem to have magically got it. One person I know from Wales actually got hold of my telephone number and discussed it with me over the telephone. It got worse. What we think has happened is that the update was in his car already, and they've overwritten it, but we don't know. We're just surmising, and that's created a bigger problem.
Sure, but David, the car you had previously, what brand of car did you have previous to the MG?
I had a Toyota Yaris Hybrid, which is a tiny car, exactly the same size engine. It's got less cabin to heat up.
A Toyota Yaris as well, David.
Yeah, it was a beautiful little car, but I've got 6 grandchildren, so I had to jump to a bigger car.
Yeah,
bigger car, sure. But do you not think that do you not think that that Toyota, because they're an enormous company, car manufacturer, that they would have ironed out what is a very, very serious, fundamental, dangerous feature, if you can call it that, of your MG ZS hybrid, that it would never have reached the equivalent Toyota hybrid would never have reached production like that, would never have been sold to the public like that, because they would have the development money to make sure that that problem was sorted out before the car ever went into production. But perhaps MG are thinking, well, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Maybe the customers won't notice, they won't care. Maybe we can get by this one.
Okay. Keith,
I think
we need to someone needs to really take a legal stance, because if it's damaging the car and you can't get
absolutely,
you need somebody who's got a little bit of savvy.
Yeah, but there's no way 6,500 RPM is acceptable.
You can't do that on your own.
But wouldn't you feel
right? I'm gonna. Sorry, Keith. And everybody else. I mean, I know we could
all night.
We could talk, but we need to respect the fact. I know Miles has to go, and our audience patience isn't infinite. But I really want to thank you. It's been a great discussion, and thank you for raising the real issues and questions that you've had from your actual vehicles. So, I've learned a lot tonight about hybrids, just to say to everybody, we do decide these topics on the podcast in response to your requests. There's a poll on the podcast forum that you can vote in. So please do ask for your suggestions for future topics, things you want to cover. You can find the audio version of the podcast on all good podcast providers. Just search for MG EVs Community Podcasts. Otherwise, that's it for us tonight. I want to thank all the volunteer moderators who keep the forums running smoothly. That's Al, Coulomb, and Rolf. And Stuart wants to give his thanks to all of us here who have given our time to share our experiences and contribute to creating this podcast tonight. And personally, I want to thank each of you. Thank you, Anne, Keith, David, and Miles for joining us this evening. If you found this podcast useful, please click on the like button. And also, if you subscribe and click the notification bell, you'll get notified next time we go live or next time we have a recording released, which is particularly useful if we change the day at the last minute. Other than that, from myself and from everybody else, I'll say goodbye and happy motoring. Goodbye, folks.
Miles.
Thanks.